Hi there everybody! The SNES was probably the best RPG machine that we've ever really gotten. It single-handedly kicked off that golden age of the JRPG with Final Fantasy II, and it was just the gift that kept on giving. And still, to this day, I still believe that some of the best RPGs ever made were made back in the early 90s on this masterpiece of a system. So here, I want to go through 10 out of 10 SNES turn-based RPGs in release order. Gosh, say that 10 times fast, so that you can see the evolution of them yourselves. First up, Dragon Quest V, released in September of 1992. Here we have my favorite Dragon Quest game, which unfortunately languished in Japan for far too long until it was fan-translated, and then finally officially released for the Nintendo DS. The story follows a little boy who travels with his father, only for, JRPG stuff to happen, as he's then left alone in the world, sold into slavery, then matures into a man, he finds a wife, and then he even conceives children. The world is so fun to explore, and it's super neat to see how towns, dungeons, and even minor characters and NPCs change over the 20 or so years. It's arguably the most story-heavy game in the entire series, and that's even including the recent Dragon Quest XI. And it also introduces monster capturing too, a good 5 or so years before Pokemon even ever existed. So if you are a fan of Pokemon, the Dragon Quest Monsters series, or just really cool, heart-wrenching stories, then you do owe it to yourself to see where it all got started. Number 2. Final Fantasy VI, released in April of 1994. It's kind of funny how sometimes your opinions really do change about games. Whenever I was a kid, I actually preferred Final Fantasy IV over 6. I just liked all the defined classes and the story. And if you watch some of my earlier videos here on the channel from many years ago, you'll find that I really didn't have the highest opinion of 6. But the older that I get, and the more that I discuss it, and the more that I play it, the more that I have come to really appreciate it. I think that the thing that was holding me back the most was that it was the first Final Fantasy to introduce that whole everyone can do everything growth system that the series has really embraced since. But at the end of the day, this is an absolutely gorgeous game, filled to the brim with secrets, lovable characters, and probably the best villain of the entire series. And all that optional bonus content in the World of Ruin really just pushed this over into masterpiece territory. Number 3. Earthbound, released in August of 1994. It really is a shame that we have to beg and grovel for anything at all related to this beloved series. I remember that we got it for Christmas, and I was reading through the strategy guide, which was designed almost like a scrapbook, while I was also watching my brother play. He was the one who wanted it after all, and I personally thought that whole "this game stinks" and those scratch and sniff stickers were just so gross. But I was proved wrong whenever I finally got to play it. I loved exploring every nook and cranny and seeing all that the game had to offer. Interestingly, Earthbound is set in America, or Eagle Land, and it's full of puns and pop culture references, and it's really created its own genre and legacy with all those Earthbound-inspired RPGs that we see over on the Steam constantly. Number 4. Chrono Trigger, released in March of 1995. The summer between middle school and high school was probably the best years of my life. I was finally out of that god-forsaken hellhole that they call middle school, and I knew that I wanted to make a change and reinvent myself for my entry into high school. Over that summer, I lost a good 30 or so pounds, and I also had Chrono Trigger to keep me company because it was my birthday gift, so I got to play it all summer long, and what a treat that was. I mean, when the creators of Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest joined forces, you knew that you had a masterpiece on your hands. Getting rid of random encounters was a stroke of genius, and here, many times the enemies are just kind of like playing around when you stumble across them. Also, the concept of field placement and hitting adjacent enemies first occurred here as well. The storyline is tight, spanning multiple time periods, and I just cannot overstate how much this masterpiece revolutionized the entire genre. Number 5. The Magical Land of Woz, released in August of 1995. I must have mentioned this awesome game like a million times before, and I still don't think that it's enough, because I love this little gem. Before this was fan-translated, I remember looking at the screenshots and game FAQs and thinking like, wow, this looks frickin' fantastic! And when that patch was finally released, I realized that it really was. You can choose your hero at the start, from an American fighter to a Chinese telepath or a genius Japanese inventor. And your journey is a bit different depending on your choice. The game is a lighthearted comedic romp, where you gain different powers, not so much though through leveling, but more through exploration and inventing. If you've not yet heard of this game, I highly suggest looking into it, and if it strikes your fancy, download it. You will not regret it. Number 6. Far East of Eden Zero, released in December of 1995. For those in the dark here, this is another Japan-only but fan-translated RPG in the much-acclaimed Far East of Eden series, which many people might not have actually heard of, because, really none of them were released over here, and most of them were also released on obscure consoles like the Neo Geo and the TurboGrafx 16. But there were actually 12 games in all, but only 2 of those have been translated into English, and they're unofficially. Anyway though, what makes this game stand out above the rest is that it doesn't take itself too seriously. I found myself laughing out loud quite a bit during this game. There's tons of secret for the avid explorer to find, and an added graphics chip that puts the game on par with many PS1 RPGs. But the real game changer here is the real-time event system, where shops are only open on certain days, sales occur at different times of day, and towns change depending on whether it's night or day. But that's like in real life. I mean, if you turn on the game on Christmas Day, Santa will come down, or on your birthday, you'll actually get a birthday gift. How cool is that? Number 7. Treasure of the Ruras, released in April of 1996. Has a more poignant and relevant game ever been created? As usual, this was only released in Japan, and it follows 3 heroes on their separate journeys to stop a never-ending cycle of death and rebirth of humanity. There's a grim, overarching tone and somber story of pollution, environmental destruction, and apathy of humanity as the world goes straight into the shitter around them. The story begins just 2 weeks before humanity is destined to perish, and that's all the time that you have. Worth noting though is the magic system. By speaking to people, reading books, or finding treasure, you'll learn different mantras or key words, and you can use those mantras to cast spells, which you can then modify with prefixes and suffixes to enable them to do different things. It's addictive, and the story is enthralling. I could not put this one down. Number 8. Luffia 2, Rise of the Sinistrals, released in May of 1996. This is probably the best sequel to the worst RPG ever made. While the first game felt very much like a Dragon Quest knockoff, Luffia 2 evolved into its own thing. This is a world-spanning epic, coming-of-age story about the resurgence of the Sinistrals, and how a small-town boy grows to deal with the threat. On the surface, it can look just like any other cookie-cutter JRPG, with turn-based battles and a town-dungeon-town progression. And while that is true, there's a whole lot more beneath the surface. There are some puzzles in these dungeons that are like the most devious things that I've ever encountered. But most of them are intuitive, and the game gives you clues on how to solve them. Lots of love and care went into this gem, and you can easily find yourself lost on a 100-hour quest as you then delve into the ancient cave to divert yourself from the main task. This masterpiece stands toe-to-toe with any Final Fantasy game, and that devious puzzles will always keep you on your toes. Number 9. Super Mario RPG, released in May of 1996. As far as I'm concerned, this is still the best Mario RPG ever conceived. The Mario and Luigi games, as well as those Paper Mario games, just do not hold a candle to it. And now I think that many modern gamers will finally see what I've been talking about since the beginning of this channel, since it's actually getting a Switch remake. Here, you get to fight in traditional turn-based battles with 3 party members, tons of attacks and powers to use, stat bonuses to allocate as you see fit, and a metric ton of hidden treasures to find. I remember as a kid, thinking it was so cool to get to play as not only Bowser, but Princess Toadstool too. But now that I'm an adult, I know better, because, while the princess is still the MVP, Bowser is just a big dumb turtle, and her cute little fluffy cloud friend is easily the better party member. I said what I said. Mallow's the best. Fight me! Number 10. God, released in December of 1996. What an absolutely fantastic hidden gem this is. But unfortunately, it was never released outside of Japan, though it does have a translation patch available. And I loved it so much that I even Let's Played it on my channel many years ago. This takes place in the real world after the aliens invaded the planet and devastated the land, so the vast majority of humanity is now in hiding, as they work as rebels to repel the aliens. But some countries, like the US, have decided to instead ally themselves with the aliens. With gorgeous graphics, a compelling storyline, real-world locations and countries to visit, as well as an innovative growth system, you're going to have tons of fun here. But it's also really obvious as to why it was never released overseas. I mean, not only are the Americans traitors to all of humanity, but it also features underage sex out of wedlock, as well as the premature death of the expectant mother. So do try to be prepared for all of that. So that's it for the top 10 best 10 out of 10 SNES turn-based RPGs. What RPGs do you think deserve that 10 out of 10 moniker? Let's all talk and chat about it. I would love to hear what you have to say. And if you like what I do on the channel, please head on over to the Patreon to sign up for early access to my videos, as well as behind-the-scenes photographs. The link to it is over in the video description. And as always, please like, comment, and subscribe, and have a good day.